This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio!
Despite the strict routines, no day there is ever the same, and working in a chaotic, often toxic setting is constantly challenging. So, what is it? It's prison ministry, and retired prison chaplain Rev'd Katy Canty joins me today to talk about what she's learned from her time inside. And in keeping with today's theme, our opening hymn is one that speaks of service. Brother, sister, let me serve you, let me be as Christ to you.
Brother, sister, let me serve you, let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey, and companions on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the road. I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your fear. I will hold my hand out to you, speak the peace you long to hear. I will weep when you are weeping, when you laugh, I laugh with you. I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony. Born of all we've known together of Christ's love and agony. Brother, sister, let me serve you, let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too.
Brother, sister, let me serve you, an appropriate hymn to welcome my guest this morning, Rev'd Katy Canty, teacher, ordained priest in the Anglican Church, wife, mother, author, and for 14 years chaplain in a Liverpool prison. And as we'll hear, she's still wondering what else God has in mind for her to do. So let's find out how it all started.
Well, actually, I think that God has a wonderful sense of humour, because the first inkling of prison came years and years ago when I left university and asked a big computer what I should do with my life. And one of the career choices was to be a prison officer. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious and completely not my thing. And so I became a teacher. But years rolled on. I married a Scouser quite late in life, but moved up to Liverpool, had young children. I'd always been part of the church, and I immediately got involved with children's work, as you do. But I got increasingly frustrated as I actually felt I'd like to speak to adults. And so I was encouraged to train as a reader in the Church of England. During that time, I did a placement. I was told to go and do a placement somewhere else. And I guess, like a lot of people, I thought, what's prison like? What does the church do in prison? And so I attached myself to a local prison for just 10 Sundays to see what it was like. And the week before I went, I can remember vividly standing up in church and saying, I am aged 50, female and 5'2", and I'm about to go into category A, male, adult prison. And I suddenly thought, I feel terrified. But the moment I stepped foot into prison, I felt something completely different. I felt compassion. And that was a real gift from God that never left me all my time there. And that was how I knew really very early on that this was where I felt God had called me to be.
Now, compassion is an emotion that can show, you can communicate it. And do you think that the prisoners saw that in you?
I always was amazed that I did not feel frightened when I met some really quite difficult people, to put it mildly. And I always had that sense that there was something that made me not vulnerable. I think, to be honest, I think a lot of them saw me like their grandmother, and because they loved their grandmothers, I suppose I fell into that category. But I just think the presence of God within me was something that, unknown to me almost, was there, that when you walked around, people were reminded, not because I was wonderful or anything, but they were reminded that God existed, and that was very powerful. I can remember one lad who actually said to me, "There's the lady with the lamp." And I said, "That's Florence Nightingale." He said, "Well, miss, you bring light." And I was absolutely amazed at that. But it wasn't me, it was God within me that made the difference.
Well, they do say that God equips us for wherever he calls us. But even so, you must have come up against people who wanted to take out all their frustrations with the system, and maybe they felt they'd been unfairly treated or were worried about family life outside. Did you ever feel that you were a target for those kind of emotions, Katie?
I found on the whole they were very respectful and very restrained, but actually it was the system they were angry with. And a lot of the time it was just a lot of listening and a lot of just letting them vent. You know, we can't tell them what to do, but I think just the fact that they're able to let go. And the other thing men often did with me was to cry. In the presence of a female, it wasn't seen to be, you know, a problem. And I think that in itself was a release.
There's a big question mark over how effective prison is for so many people who are there. I have heard it said that at any one time as many as 70 or 75% of the people in prison have mental health issues. What would you say in response to that, Katie?
I used to despair over this because it is just so prevalent in prison that so many lads are coping with so many different problems. I would love to see a different system. I would love to go back to having asylums, not lunatic asylums, but an asylum meaning a place of safety. I would love to see an alternative system where those with really difficult and enduring problems like that could be in a constructive environment that is organised and supported, so that, for example, their medication is taken at the right time, right place, and that they could somehow be self-supporting, so that they are actually together as a unit, so they help each other, but also are not constrained by prison. I really, really used to despair over the number of really seriously ill people who'd got mental issues, who, in my opinion, really were certainly not helped in any way by prison, because we're not a psychiatric hospital. We can't deal with them in that way.
Did you meet people who relied on the security of prison, the routine, the fact that their life was ordered for them, that they found difficulty in existing outside a system where they had to make their own decisions? And
I did, unfortunately, and I think for many of them their lives are so chaotic. They come from sort of dysfunctional backgrounds, and so they liked the structure of prison. And actually it's very easy in prison. Everything is there. Healthcare, dental care, it's all just a few paces away. And when they leave prison, I think this is one of the things they struggle with, because they've then got to organise themselves. And it is really hard for many of them. And the other sad thing I found about prison was that some people preferred to be in prison because they were off the street, they had 3 hot meals a day, they had company, they had things to do, and they were safe. They found prison a much better place to be. We even had some prisoners that refused to leave prison because they really didn't want to cope on the outside. And clearly there's something wrong there, something wrong with how we manage rehabilitation, how we manage beyond the gates, which I'm not sure what the answer is.
So how much progress did you feel that you made on a faith journey with these people? Did you feel that you just put something out there that for them to think about, or?
It's so difficult to gauge. Obviously, we run like an ordinary sort of parish. So we ran ordinary Sunday services. We ran Bible study groups, which were very interesting because the people that came had no church or biblical background. So they asked really, really penetrating questions and wanted real answers. So I think for those that were open, I think actually prison gives them a lot of time to think and reflect. We gave out so many Bibles because often they just want something to read. So a lot of them actually sat and read the Bible, which was interesting because it sort of stays in their head. So I think for those who were really beginning to look, we were there and we were readily available all the time. They didn't have to wait till Sunday. They could come and speak to us at any time. I think for many people, we were just another service. And a lot of the prisoners used us as chaplains at difficult times like bereavements, when we would offer them the chapel, which, you know, on the outside they wouldn't necessarily be able to walk into a church. We used to get them over to the chapel at the same time as a funeral. We would give them a cross or something, or a little card to say they'd been to the chapel. I sometimes would sit with lads who'd say lost their nan, and I'd say, talk to me about your nan, and then I'd write it down and put it on a card, and they would get that read out at a funeral. And so we sort of interacted with them in lots of very low-key ways. Where that went to faith-wise, I don't know, but I believe they did remember it. And just occasionally we got lads who really found God big style, and I will be honest, it wasn't that many, but just occasionally we got lads who really met God in a very deep way whilst in prison, and their lives were absolutely transformed, and they were the best people actually to then communicate that with the other prisoners because they could see what a change had happened.
How involved did you get with the staff, Katie?
Chaplains go everywhere, so we were all over the prison, every part of it, the workshops, the offices with the cleaning staff. So we were probably the best known people in prison. And yes, when the prison staff are being trained, we talk to them about chaplaincy. We offer them the chapel because staff have problems as well. Staff have bereavements and losses, and the chapel is in the middle of prison and it's open for everybody. So we got to know the staff. A lot of people didn't want to know anything about the church, but they warmed to us as people because we were there and we were people you could actually come and talk to.
When I needed a neighbor, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a neighbor, were you there? And the creed and the color of the name won't matter, were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? Were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, were you there?
My guest this morning is Reverend Canon Katy Canty, who's just been talking about her years as a prison chaplain in Liverpool. Following her retirement, she wrote a book, Heartbreak, Hope and Holy Moments, a raw and authentic account of prison life. But her years as a prison chaplain left her with a real concern for all chaplains and led her to yet another ministry, as she now explains.
For 4 or 5 years after I retired, I went to the diocese and I kept saying, look after chaplains, because I felt as a chaplain, as an ordained minister, we were somehow on the edge of the church organisation because we weren't the parish people. So I kept saying, look after chaplains. And so they turned around and said, you do it. So they appointed me, gave me a grand title and basically asked me to care for all the chaplains in our diocese in Liverpool. And so, first of all, I thought, well, where are the chaplains? And the obvious ones are in schools and universities, in hospitals, in hospices. But then I discovered there were so many more that are developing, particularly in Liverpool retail and business centres. We have got chaplains on the railway, the waterways. We've put them into the YMCA. We've got them at the airport. Some of these are ordained and some of them aren't. Some of them are full-time, some of them are part-time, some of them are volunteers. And so my real vision was to bring them together, to rejoice together in the common ministry we had of going outside the church door, meeting people who might never come to church, but nevertheless we would be there with the love and the compassion and the caring of Christ at times when they perhaps weren't even thinking about needing anything, that they might be at crisis points, and they would find a chaplain, somebody they could talk to, somebody who would listen, somebody who might signpost, somebody who might do something practical. But they were there, and I believe chaplaincy has got a really strong missional intent, because we are out there, we're outside the church, and we're meeting people. One of my jobs was to actually keep on saying to the church, this is what we're doing, to celebrate what we're doing. And in fact, since that has sort of started, we've seen much better integration with chaplains joining in with deanery events and things like this, so that they're not forgotten. They're integrated with the ordained clergy as equal partners in mission, because the church needs chaplains and chaplains need the church. We mustn't run independently.
What would you like to do now, Katie?
For myself personally, I don't know. I've retired twice now, so I just think you just keep looking for where God opens up something. I've never really planned what I was going to do with all this. It's sort of happened. And I believe each of us are individuals. We're all different. We've all got different skills and abilities. And God can use us in different ways. And I just sometimes think, well, what's God going to do next? I don't know. But I think it's about being open, being willing to give it a go, and to actually see, well, maybe I can do something in my local area. Maybe I can lobby somebody. Maybe I can get involved. Maybe I can volunteer. Because however ill-equipped, and I used to feel very ill-equipped when I was in prison, I used to think, God, what am I going to say? And I had no idea. And you just have to open your mouth and get on with it. And in the same way, we so often are put in positions, just everyday positions, where actually we are taking the love and the life of Christ to people through what we say. And it's about just being open to let God use us, because we're all very usable.
Thank you, Rev'd Katy Canty, retired prison chaplain and recently retired as Dean of Sector Ministers in the Diocese of Liverpool, where she worked to support all chaplains and establish better connections between their wide-reaching ministries and the local church. And I can't help but think that God has still more for Rev'd Katy Canty to achieve. Last Sunday afternoon I went to Belle Abbey Chapel, and as I turned off the Douglas to Port Erin Road at Colby, I passed on the corner of the lane a very attractive private house, which many years ago I knew as Belle Abbey Chapel. What I didn't realise was quite how many changes of use that modest building has had. But fortunately, I found that the Reverend David Bush, former vicar of Moraun, had visited Belle Abbey some 40 years ago for an edition of his Keystones programme, exploring the history of some of our island churches. Let's join David now in conversation with Harry Kinley and Ian Pirrie in a Keystones programme first broadcast in the mid-1980s.
The guidebook to the parish of Kirk Arbury, which was published in 1959, tells us the church was licensed for worship under Vicar Charles Langton in 1883. But of course the building is older than that, 112 years, and it had a previous history. Can you tell us something about that, Harry, when I believe it was used as an ale house in the last century?
It was an ale house called the Colby Ale House. You've heard of the notorious press gang. Well, they landed at Scarlet, you see, in a boat. It must have been about 8 o'clock at night. It was harvest time. And the press gang, they eventually ploughed their way up to the main road. And of course, the pub was lit up. And inside here, there were farmers, elderly men, and quite a lot of young farmers, you see. The press gang, 2 officers, complete with swords, walked in. And there was a bit of an uproar. And they looked round, you, numbered about half a dozen. We want you for the British Navy, Royal Navy, you see. So the old men thought now we'll do something about this. So they said, now look here, sir, he said to the number one. He said, these men have been working all day. They've been in the harvest since 7 o'clock this morning. He said, they're tired and weary. They're not much used to you in this state. Let them go up the loft. There's the loft there. And have a rest, you see. So they agreed on that. Mind you, in the meantime, one of the old chaps spoke in Manx to these young farmers and told them exactly what to do. Told them to go up the loft, and then Manx told them what they should do when they got in the loft. Anyway, time went on, and the officers have more rum, and they thought it was a wonderful idea, this, singing, and the old men were there with their old pipes and one thing and another. Everyone was having a wonderful time. So it come then the time they decided to get the young chaps down from the loft. So they sent a rating up, shouting and carrying on, and the officer came along, "What's wrong with you up there? Get those boys down at once. Come on, we're late now." "I'm sorry, sir, there's no boys here." "What do you mean there's no boys here?" So they dashed up the ladder, went in, and discovered that they'd put a hole through the thatch and disappeared, never to be found again. How mad the Englishmen were, shouting and cursing, and when they saw the old Manxmen grinning and making fun of them, they fell on them. The place was like a madhouse. But it didn't last long. The English sailors had to hurry for the shore where the boat was awaiting them, and they left. The British Navy was compelled to sail at dawn without the Manx boys. They intended to steal from their native isle. The older Manxmen went home that night in good heart. Their boys were safe at home.
Well, thank you, Harry. That was a lovely tale, and it was wonderful that it, in fact, was a true story. Now, on the roadside of the church, there are 3 windows. Harry, I believe there is a reason for 3 windows on that side.
Well, there's 3 cottages. It was converted into 3 cottages, really.
And in one of those cottages, you think your mother was born?
Yes, there was rumour to that effect. I know one or 2 ladies that say she was born in there.
Well, let's go inside now and see how the building has been changed from being a pub and cottages into the house of God for worship. Our organist here now is Dr. Ian Pirrie, and as on Sundays, the church is warm and dry, but it hasn't always been like this. Can you recollect, Ian, what happened here in the 70s?
Well, there was a cloudburst in the hills above Colby, and the whole church was flooded to a depth of about 3 inches as a result. Now, the trouble was that my eldest daughter was being married in the church just about 10 days later. There was a member of the congregation who was a master at King William, and he organised a squad of boys to come up here and remove the fitted carpet which ran the whole length of the church, leaving us with a bare concrete expanse. Well, for the wedding, the vicar lent us his corridor carpet for the aisle, and we had to lend our hearth rug to go across in front of the altar. And when the wedding was over, my instructions to the guest was, last guest, please bring the hearth rug, because we need it for the reception. The reception was in our own house. We definitely needed the hearth rug for our sitting room.
Well, now, Colby Church has been enlarged a little since it was an alehouse and cottages, and at the east end is a small apse which contains the altar, and uphill towards the farm is a new entrance porch and vestry. Now, here in the church, the seats are freestanding, but I believe there was in the past a pew, one of the old-fashioned box pews. You were telling us about that, Harry?
Oh, yes, I mean Walker's private pew. Yes, it was a box-type pew, and it had a seat. And at one end there was a post standing about 4 foot high, and a back rail, of course. It was pretty rotten too by this time, like lots of the woodwork in the church, so we done away with it.
Near where this box pew was, there is now an interesting granite font. Do we know anything about this, Ian?
Yes, when they were repairing the boiler at Arby Church, they had to replace it. They had to put in a new boiler. And when they cleared out the old one, they found behind it this very old granite font. So they removed it and brought it to the end of the little church here at Belle Abbey, and it's stood there ever since, and it's been most suitable.
Well, whatever the building was in years gone by, the little church of Belle Abbey continues to witness to the ancient faith of Christianity, and its walls have, over generations, seen many events of local history and absorbed and soaked up the prayers of thousands of local and visiting people. May it long continue to do so. Thank you, Harry Kinley and Ian Pirrie, for coming today to share your recollections with us. And so we leave Colby Church in good heart.
And Belle Abbey Chapel in Colby continued in good heart for another 30 years, until 2016, when the wheel of time turned almost a full circle and the chapel was converted into a single house. And whilst we're in the area, Belle Chapel above Colby are celebrating their 174th chapel anniversary with a special service this afternoon at 3 o'clock, at which Captain of the parish, Paul Costain, will be the guest soloist, and the service will be followed by a light buffet with a warm welcome for all. And on Thursday morning, Ballakilferrick will be open for coffee and chat between 11 and 12:30. There's no charge, but donations to the building fund would be appreciated. This is part of the regular outreach to build up Ballakilferrick Chapel as a hub for the local community. And now, as usual, we'll finish with a look at the rest of our notice board. The Flower Festival in Selby Methodist Church will be open again today from 1:30 until 4 o'clock. Then open again on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, each day from 10:30 until 3:30. In addition to the floral displays, there'll be musicians, Manx Wildlife Trust presentations and, of course, refreshments. Dalby Church are having their monthly Taizé worship again this evening at 6:30. Everyone's very welcome to join them for this simple, reflective and contemplative worship. That's tonight at 6:30 in Dalby Church. Looking now to the week ahead, this Wednesday the weekly concert in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas will be given by the Lonvain Ladies Choir, starting at the usual time of 7:45. It's free admission with refreshments afterwards and a retiring collection, and St Thomas's Church is just off Douglas Promenade, close to the Gaiety Theatre and Villa Marina complex. On now to Thursday the 25th, and on Thursday afternoon, Tea at 3 offers a sumptuous afternoon tea served at 3 o'clock in Ballagary Methodist Chapel in St Mark's. And on Thursday evening, the Glenfaber Chorale will be in concert in the Erin Arts Centre in Port Erin, starting at 7:30. Admission is free with a retiring collection, and there'll be refreshments served after the concert. Also, this Thursday evening, the 25th, there'll be a grand choral concert in St Matthew's Church on the North Quay here in Douglas. Vivaldi's Gloria and other choral items will be performed by the Manx Festival Chorus and Friends, with guest artists Debbie Gooding, Mandy Griffin, Graham Crowe, Roy Baker and Aileen Morgans. Gareth Moore is the organist and the conductor is John Riley. The concert on Thursday starts at 8 p.m. and there'll be refreshments in St Matthew's Church Hall afterwards. Admission is free with a retiring collection in support of Lookie's Aid, a local charity committed to unlocking young potential. On now to next weekend, and St Maccles's Week starts next Saturday, the 27th, with a week-long programme of events and services celebrating the heritage of the Isle of Man's patron saint. The events on the first day of St Maccles's Week, that's next Saturday the 27th, are a walk round Macclesfield with guides Phil Crane and Marinda Farger, starting at Macclesfield Parish Church at 2 p.m, and a garden tea served at Croyt Fox next to Macclesfield Church, served at 3:30. Then the special launch service in Macclesfield Parish Church is next Sunday morning at 10:30, when the summer singers will provide the celebratory music. There'll be lots more information about the week, which really does offer something for every taste, when I'm joined on this programme next Sunday by the organiser of St Maccles's Week, Reverend Dr Ian Folds. And last but by no means least, the boys of Broughton Parish Church Choir make a welcome return to the island next weekend for their summer school and holiday. They'll be singing at the service in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas next Sunday morning at 11 a.m, and then they'll sing choral evensong next Sunday afternoon in St Paul's Church in Ramsey, and that's at 4 p.m. The choir will also sing evensong on Monday the 29th of July in Maloo Parish Church, on Tuesday the 30th of July in the Royal Chapel, St John's Parish Church, and again on Thursday August the 1st in St Matthew's Church on the North Quay here in Douglas, and all those weekday services of evensong will start at 7 p.m. And I'm afraid that's all that we've time for now. But I'll be back later in our virtual lounge tonight from 9 o'clock onwards. Virtually everything you'll need to round off your day. But the easy listening music and your requests and dedications are very real, and I'd love you to join me if you can. And so, till whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week, and a very good morning.